Good evening, darlings. So, as part of the typical traditions here, it's very typical to make pumpkin pie for the Yuletide. Now, typically, this would be something that a female elf would do, but since I have had to do the work for both parents, I have had to learn how to do some baking. So, I have here pie crust, which I will put a link to the recipe down below, which has sat in the fridge actually 2 days because I've been so busy. This is half of a pumpkin, all pureed, but no other additives. And I have a slightly floured cutting board and a rolling pin. So we're going to get ahead and get started. So I'm probably going to use about half of this dough ball to make the crust. This recipe makes enough for according to the directions. It's been quite a while since I've made one. It's supposed to make 2 pies worth of crust, so I'm going to start by working it a little bit to make it a little soft, and just work it apart into 2 separate but equal sized balls. So now I've taken one off, which I will put back into the refrigerator so that we can have another pie, but we're only going to be working on one here this evening. And so I'm going to roll it a little bit around on the floured surface so that it doesn't stick to my hands. And you're just going to press it out into slightly round shape, and then you're going to get your rolling pin and start going around on all the sides, because you want it to be as even as possible so you're not sort of losing any of your crust, because you'll have to cut off anything that doesn't sort of fit around the pie pan. So this will take a little while, so I'll probably just cut this and then move on to what the finished product should look like. Right, so we're almost there now, just a little bit more. And then we'll be done, and we'll go ahead and put it in our pan and sort of crimp around the edges to make sure that it's sort of even and cut off any ugly excess. You know, you don't want any of that business. Okay, so the way you'll want to check the fitting is just by plopping it right into your pie pan and seeing. You can see here that it's sort of not touching all the edges, which means we're going to have to continue to roll out just a little bit until everything is done evenly. It should be pretty thin though, and that's fine, darling. That's exactly what you want it to be like, so don't get worried. If you like a thicker crust, just use more of the dough. You'll probably have to do another half on the recipe just to give yourself. I'm going to go ahead now and drop our crust into our pan. We're going to have to scoot it around a little bit to get it to fit properly. And it may not be the most perfectly round, and that's alright. That's what a knife is for. You're just going to cut around the edge to do that. So make sure that you press it in a little bit lightly. You don't want to break your crust, of course, but just enough so that it's meeting all of the edges. Right, and then you can just take your knife and we're going to run it around the outside here. Just along the edge of the pan. Now you can take this dough that you're taking off and you can work it back into the rest of the dough and use it that way. You can also, if there's any small holes that you've noticed when you were stretching it, you can use it as sort of a patch and press it in that way. Or if there's just one little hole out on the edge, you can use it to fill that in as well. You know, it's going to taste wonderful no matter what. It's just about how it looks, you know. So you just use the excess to really just fill in and make everything beautiful. I have a little spot here. I'm just going to press in just a little on the edge there. Ah, beautiful. Now, I didn't really have enough to crimp. If you do have a lot of excess, then you'll take your sides like so, and you'll just press them together like that all the way around. It looks very beautiful, and it tastes pretty good too. Sort of adds a little bit of structural integrity to your handhold of your crust. Now I'm just making sure that everything is meeting now that I've cut. I want to make sure there's no air bubbles, and you will want to take a fork and just sort of lightly prick the bottom of your pie crust, just to make sure that any air bubbles that get trapped there are going to leave. Otherwise, you'll get sort of a bowing on the bottom of your crust, and you won't have as much space for that delicious filling that you're going to spend so much time working on, and that's going to taste so good, and you don't want to ruin that for yourself. As I see, I have some bubbles here. Oh dear. There. All gone. Beautiful, beautiful. So now you see the pie crust, it has all the little pricks in it, and you'll want to go ahead and start baking this for about 10 minutes on 190 degrees centigrade. So 10 minutes in your oven, which should already be preheated. Don't throw this in while it's preheating, or you'll mess up the amount of timing, and the cooking won't be very even. So 190 degrees centigrade for 10 minutes, or until it's a crispy golden. Alright, darling. So while the pie crust is baking in the oven, we're going to go ahead and start working on the filling. So this is 2 cups here of the pumpkin puree. So we're going to go ahead and add that. And then to that, we're going to add half a teaspoon each of ginger and cinnamon and of nutmeg. So we have cinnamon. And cinnamon, I find if you do a little extra, it really only improves things. It doesn't really hurt, darling. Nutmeg. And allspice, just a little bit in there, and ginger. I prefer fresh ginger, so this is fresh pureed ginger as opposed to dry, but of course, you know, add what you prefer the taste of. Actually, you know what, I'm going to do this a little more like my, my mother's recipe and do a touch of vanilla. I know. Very scandalous. Okay, and you just want to give that a good mix. Make sure that the spices are evenly distributed. Oh, and a pinch of salt. Baking always needs just a pinch of salt, it seems. Once you have those in there, you can already smell that it's quite nice. I think it needs a little more cinnamon and nutmeg, personally. Mostly the cinnamon. But, you know, I really like a lot of cinnamon in my pumpkin pie. It's a little uneven. So, you know, that may just be me personally, darlings. You know, you don't have to take my advice. You can follow the recipe if you prefer. The spices are just absolutely wonderful. It really does smell like the Yuletide. Now we're going to go ahead, and in a separate bowl, I'm actually just going to go ahead and use this one. We're going to mix our wet ingredients. So now we're going to go ahead and do the wet ingredients. So I'm putting the last of the 4 eggs in. You'll also want to have your half a cup of milk. Alright, so now that you've got the half a cup of milk and the 4 eggs in here, you're going to want to add half a cup of honey. This is a fresh local honey here. Now, keeping in mind that the honey is the only thing that's going to sweeten it unless you're going to add brown sugar. I really think brown sugar has a better flavor as far as the spices and bringing out the natural sweetness of the pumpkin, as opposed to white sugar. So I would go with that. And then keeping in mind that as far as your sweetener goes, you can either use heavy whipping cream, half a cup, or half a cup of condensed milk. I'm going to do condensed milk because I'm using a little bit less of the honey, unfortunately. I ran out because I did not plan this very well. So I'm going to go ahead and add my condensed milk. And then you want to give this all a good stir together, and then we're going to go ahead and beat it into the rest of the contents of the pie filling. So let's go ahead and break up these yolks and give it a good stir together. And then I'm going to add just a touch also of vanilla to this, because as you may figure out, I really do enjoy vanilla quite a bit. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead now and add this all in here. Now it's the egg yolks that are going to give you that sort of stiffness to your pie. I just heard the pie crust is done, so I don't want to take too long with this. But we're going to just stir this until it's a nice, even consistency. Alright, darling, so it's a nice color and consistency, and a good flavor. Now, I would caution you to taste your filling before you put it in, because when you bake, the sweetness is going to decrease after it's been baked. So, if it tastes perfect, add just a little bit of brown sugar to it. So I did find a little more honey and added it to it, and now it's really quite nice. So we're going to go ahead. I pulled the pie crust out of the oven. It's starting to get nice and crispy and flaky. I did let it cool a little bit, and so we're just going to go ahead and start adding in our filling here. Now remember, of course, that the filling is going to expand as you're cooking, so you don't want to overfill it. I say, as I'm probably overfilling it right now. And of course, depending on how thick your filling is going to change how long of a time it's going to take to cook. So just smooth that out. Ah, yes. And then I always like to give it just a little sprinkle of some cinnamon sugar, just for looks, you know. Beautiful. And maybe just a touch of chili powder. Alright, darling, so we're going to go ahead and bake the pie now at 200 centigrade, which is around 400, I think, Fahrenheit, for 30 to 50 minutes. Just keep a good eye on it. You want to make sure that it's evenly cooked. Check by just sort of wiggling it to make sure that center is firm. Alright, darling, so the pie is now all finished. It just came out of the oven. You should let it cool a little bit, about 10 or 15 minutes, depending on the thickness of your pie. If it's very thick, like this one, you'll want to wait about 15 minutes. And then you can go ahead and serve it. It's so good when it's still warm. A little bit of fresh whipped cream or vanilla ice cream is incredibly delicious on top of it. So until next time, darlings, thank you for tuning in. Cheers and ta-ta.